Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan Tucker. I'm the Director of Strategy, Governance and the Vice Chancellor's Office at Federation University, and I'm delighted to be your MC this afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. I'd like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We're honoured to have a very distinguished group of guests here with us today. We don't have time to acknowledge each of you individually, but please know that your presence is greatly appreciated. I'd also like to make special mention to those joining us online. I heard we have at least 200,000 people joining us from around Australia and globally, so welcome to all of those online. We're delighted to have you here. Today, we'll be hearing from an outstanding lineup of speakers, each bringing their own expertise and experience on ESG, leadership and the future of work. And while they come from different sectors, they're united by a shared commitment to empower the next generation of ESG leaders and to drive a more sustainable future for us all. To kick us off, we have a brief welcome from Professor Duncan Bentley, Vice Chancellor and President of Federation University. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Megan. I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri people, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations peoples. It is such a pleasure to welcome all of you, both here in the room and online, to the Future Ready Youth Careers and ESG Leadership Forum. The distinction of all of you in the room is fabulous, and I know that all of you and those online will be really inspired by what you are going to hear today. On behalf of Federation University Australia, Victoria's leading regional university here in the state of Victoria, I give you a warm welcome to all of you, our distinguished guests, our industry partners, academic colleagues, students, and so many friends, all joining us both in person and online. ESG is no longer a peripheral concern. It must be central to how we educate, how we innovate, and how we lead. And today's gathering is testament to the power of collaboration across sectors and across countries to address the most pressing challenges of our time. We are proud to partner with the ESG Future Foundation in hosting this event, and I would like to acknowledge the Foundation's leadership in convening a program which is focused on bridging the ESG skills gap and preparing the leaders of the future. Today's agenda is purposeful and wide-ranging, and we'll hear the latest from sustainability, data and AI, skills and training, and strategic partnerships that span continents. We'll hear experts from industry, government and academia who all bring fresh perspectives and bold ideas to the table. And that's what we should seize on, those bold ideas that will be future shaping for all of us. A very special welcome and a thank you to the students and the early career professionals who are here with us today. I'm especially pleased that we're streaming this event to China, broadening our dialogue and deepening our ties. You are all vital to this conversation because the future we are building belongs to you.
Thank you, Duncan. We'll now hear a video message from former Senator and Chief Minister of the ACT, as well as Board Director of the ESG Future Foundation, Gary Humphries.
Participants in today's seminar. I'm Gary Humphries from the ESG Foundation, and I want to convey my regrets that I can't be with you all today for this seminar. I will be travelling at the time of the seminar, and time differences will make it very difficult for me to take part at the time. So I'm sending a message of support and solidarity with my colleague Professor Bentley, and wish you all the very best for this occasion. The ESG Foundation believes that transparency and accountability are important components of the corporate world's addressing the future. We face a future in which there are probably more uncertainties than has been the case for decades, where the responsibilities of businesses with respect to the environment, with respect to good corporate governance, are in a legal sense more numerous and more onerous than ever before, and in a moral sense are also pressing hard down on those corporate players. And as such, it's extremely important to take stock from time to time, to assess what it is that's important for corporate players, for companies to be doing, and for a weighting of the evidence that they must consider in undertaking the task of doing well in that environment. Businesses are all too often measured purely in terms of their financial bottom line, how much the profit they make, how much dividends they return to investors and so on. The question that ESG Foundation poses is, how are those objectives met while also ensuring that our environment and the broader social and economic needs of our world are met at the same time? Companies are important citizens of the world. They have great influence, they have the capacity to change outcomes, to make society as in general better or worse depending on their behaviour. We're all very familiar with corporations that have behaved badly and that have caused suffering to citizens of the world. ESG Foundation believes that through accountability and transparency, we can do a lot to make sure that that behaviour is minimised, and that those who exhibit high values in the corporate world are appropriately acknowledged and rewarded. So today's seminar is about exploring those issues, how that can be made to happen, how we can advance the exercise of sharing the load as citizens, whether individual or corporate, of making our world a better place. Not to put too grand a statement or vision on the statement. So thank you for your participation. My regrets that I can't be there in person to take part. I look forward very much to seeing the outcomes. I'm very grateful for the participation of a lot of very influential and well-informed people in a debate which is extremely important for us all to be having. How do we pull our weight in these uncertain times? So thank you, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes of today's seminar.
I'm going to be running up and down those stairs a lot today, so bear with me. We've just heard a very powerful welcome from our first two presenters about the importance of ESG and the collective role of businesses, universities, government and communities in achieving better outcomes for people and for planet. Next, we're going to delve a little deeper into corporate responsibility and the role companies can play in achieving ESG outcomes. And often when we think of ESG and about corporate responsibility, we turn our minds to senior leadership, the CEO, the executive, or the board. But as our first keynote speaker, who you just heard from, Gary Humphries described, true ESG leadership is much broader than that. Let's hear again from Gary.
I'm back again, and I wanted to take some time to talk about issues of corporate responsibility, and in particular how a person who holds responsibility within the corporate structure takes on the responsibility of being a good corporate citizen, about which I spoke before. Obviously, there are many people who guide and direct the work of a company. Those who are its leaders, on its board of directors, its chief executive officer, the chairman of a board, whatever structure a company may have are responsibilities which need to be taken account of very carefully when decisions are made about the future direction of the company. But I want to talk today a little bit more about those who are further down the chain, people who've got responsibilities for issues within the structure of a company which may not be managerial or at the top of the tree, so to speak, but still deal with the way in which the company operates, whose decisions can be very significant in the way in which the company proceeds to execute its task. Obviously, there are legal obligations on companies, and there are particular obligations on boards and people holding particular offices under the various companies' legislation that apply across the world. But other citizens who operate below that level also have responsibilities which are not merely legal. In the context of what the ESG Foundation is working towards, we see those people as having responsibilities to provide leadership, even though it might not be a role with a leadership title on it, leadership in an organisation. And I want to make some comments about how they can do that in the work that they do. Three principles I would like to articulate in that respect. One is to be well informed. As a person with responsibility inside a company, it's obviously important to understand the mission and the corporate objectives of that particular company. It's also important to understand the obligations imposed on office holders of a company, even if the person that I'm addressing with these remarks doesn't hold that office themselves, but works underneath that person. If they fail to understand what their superior needs to do in a legal sense, there is a greater risk that that person to whom they answer may themselves not fully understand and may overlook a responsibility in a corporate or legal sense which they have. So it pays for those further down the chain to be aware of their responsibilities in a legal sense. But it also pays to understand the context, the broader context. As a young student in political science at the University of New England in Australia, a lecturer made the very important point that in contemporary societies, power goes to those who are best informed. And the extent to which you, as a member of a corporate structure, understand the environment you're working in, understand the latest developments, understand the legal framework and the corporate responsibilities that entails, the more you are in charge of that knowledge, the more powerful you are in influencing the course of events within your corporate structure in a positive way. Now, obviously, it's also possible with that knowledge to operate in a less than constructive way, but I hope that that knowledge can be used in a way which advances the interests of the company and, incidentally, your credit as a responsible member of a corporate team for the purposes of promotion. I think it's important to be across not just the rules that strictly apply to the operation of the company, but also to the broader environment in which the company operates. So if it's in mining, for example, to understand international movement in mining, in raw materials prices and why markets operate, to understand what's happening in a geopolitical sense, so that changes in that environment that might affect the company can be anticipated and worked towards. And to generally understand the way in which the world is now far more interdependent than it ever has been in the past. Things happening in Brazil or India or China have as much impact on what goes on in Australia today as they ever have in the past. And those who are working in a company need to be aware of that. It's not a matter for others to deal with. So power comes from knowledge, and being the best person in the room with respect to acquisition and retention of that knowledge is a great asset and an important stepping stone towards making the company effective. The second matter I would draw attention to is the need to work collaboratively within networks and to have people around you that understand the mission as well as you do, hopefully, and who are on the same page and work towards objectives that are mutually beneficial to the entire company and the team in which that particular person operates. I've seen many examples of people who are brilliant in their fields, very capable, very much aware of what needs to happen to achieve particular objectives, who are poor communicators of that sense of mission or sense of objective, and who find themselves out on a limb when others around whom they're working or who are working with them don't appreciate the same objectives that they do. Building not just networks in a very clinical or corporate sense, but also in the sense of sort of people that you get on with. I'm back again, and I wanted to, whatever has been in the past, things happening in Brazil or India or China have as much impact on what goes on in Australia today as they have in the mission as well as you do, hopefully, and who are on the same page and work towards objectives that are mutually beneficial to the entire company and the team in which that particular person operates. I've seen many examples of people who are brilliant in their fields, very capable, very much aware of what needs to happen to achieve particular objectives, who are poor communicators of that sense of mission or sense of objective, and who find themselves out on a limb when others around whom they're working or who are working with them don't appreciate the same objectives that they do. Building not just networks in a very clinical or corporate sense, but also in the sense of sort of people that you get on with, friendships even at that level, is really a very valuable way of advancing broader objectives. And for people who want to, as it were, infect the environment or the culture of a company with high values, values of good corporate governance, values that respect the environment, values that make companies accountable and transparent, the more that you exhibit those values and persuade people around you to share those values, the more effective you become as a corporate player. And I believe that the capacity of people to build those networks is an extremely important component of building the overall resilience of a company. People who are a team of 100 individuals that work within little silos or corrals and do their own job extremely well, but don't network very well, is unlikely to be an environment in which success can be ensured. The third factor I wanted to talk about was what I call corporate courage. We live in, as I've said, an increasingly complex world. The requirements for being across all the factors that might impinge on a corporate decision is so much more difficult than it's been in the past, and as citizens, and particularly here as corporate players, we need to be aware of how that interacts and how it can affect the way that we work. Sometimes one, from that vantage point, sees that things aren't going as they should, and that may not just be in the sense of the law isn't being respected or a corporate regulation isn't being observed. Obviously that's important to call out when you see it. But in the sense that a better approach can be taken which is more consistent with the values of an organisation, a corporation that aspires to be a leader in its field, that aspires to do well and to be an exemplar of certain values. Sometimes it's easy to point that out and to expect others to fall in line with that approach. Sometimes it requires a certain amount of courage to rattle cages, to knock on doors and say, "Sir or madam, I don't think we're doing this the right way. I think we've overlooked something. If there are issues that need to be better understood, can we have a discussion about that?" That requires a measure, sometimes, of courage, being prepared to call out something which isn't working well or which doesn't respect the values that a good corporate player ought to respect. Now, the consequences of inaction are often quite easy for an individual to step around. Sometimes you can observe things aren't going well because you're a member of a broader team, when things turn out badly, you can avoid blame. And that's not a surprising human reaction to problems that arise in a corporate sense. But a good team operator, a good corporate citizen, a person who is prepared to shoulder both legal and moral responsibility, needs to step up in those circumstances and take some responsibility, some ownership of those issues. And I urge people in that environment to be unafraid to go forward and make sure that if there is a gap between action and ideal, that gap is closed to the extent that that's possible. Now, there is a difference between being courageous and being fearless. Fearless I define as a person who doesn't understand fear, doesn't understand risk or danger. You don't want to be in that position. You want to appreciate how far you can push the boundaries without breaking through those boundaries and falling out to your disadvantage. It's a fine line, and there's no easy guide to be able to address that difference. But we see, I think, across the corporate world, far too much craven behaviour, far too much willingness to sit on one's hands and not act when the need is demonstrably there to deal with issues of misgovernance, of failure in a social or environmental sense to meet the responsibilities of a company or an organisation. And the consequences are generally bad for the society in which the company operates more broadly, but they are likely at the end of the day to be adverse to the company itself. The individual who overlooks those things might not bear personal responsibility, might escape blame, but might not escape moral responsibility. And I would say to those who find themselves in that position, consider the risks of inaction, consider the risks in the broader sense of not taking some measure of responsibility, and instead be prepared to be brave, be courageous in that environment. I want to say lastly something about the difficulty of working in a world in which knowledge is so much harder to pin down. On so many fronts, not least the environment and issues like global warming, there are a large number of competing views in which it is sometimes difficult to make a clear assessment of where things actually fall, what the actual truth is in an environment where argument is much contested. And obviously, in some circumstances, with the complexity of the knowledge that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it's very difficult without a high degree of technical expertise to get to the bottom of that conundrum. But there are some guidelines, some pointers you can address in that respect. One is to go and to rely on reliable sources of knowledge. There are too many temptations to rely on a social media feed ahead of a reliable and checked source of information, one that has checks and balances that are likely to make that source of information better to rely upon. The second is to take soundings with others who use the same level of care and diligence in their exercise of their responsibilities. Finding out what other people think doesn't necessarily give you a complete answer, but it does position you within a field in which there may be more people tending to one end of the field with a concern about an issue or a way in which a problem should be dealt with. And it's good to know whether you're in that corner of the field or whether you're at the other end and isolated. So again, that networking I spoke about before comes into its own at that point and becomes important to deal with as a way of solving a problem, particularly one to do with the reliability of knowledge. Of course, corporations themselves contribute to the body of knowledge which is available about what goes on in a particular field of operation. And it's important for corporations to have accurate and reliable evidence of what they do. To the extent that, as a corporate officer, you have responsibility to ensure that the records, that the output of a company is properly measured and recorded, it's very important that you not cut corners or take that task less than seriously. We have seen examples of misleading statements from corporations that ought to know better, based sometimes on a willful desire to mislead, but also sometimes based simply on a failure to keep proper record of what they're doing and the impact of what they're doing. Don't ever find yourself contributing to that process willingly, if you can possibly avoid it. So it's extremely exciting to be involved in major projects with a company, large or small. It carries responsibilities, but in the world in which we live, a failure to understand the broad social and, I would even say, the moral context in which you work is a major problem. It's a major temptation which should be avoided. And I hope that those who take part in the seminar today and those who have those responsibilities or are seeking to acquire those responsibilities in the corporate context will be prepared to understand how they can take that task on responsibly, morally correctly, and advance the interests of not just the company for which they work, but also themselves as members of a corporate team.
What a fantastic presentation there from Gary Humphries, and I really liked his statement that power goes to those who are best informed, and the challenge to work in networks, to think about how to have an impact across our companies and organisations, to have that corporate courage to ensure that actions align with values. So I think a really great way to kick us off for today's event. Next, we'll be hearing from another remote speaker, Managing Director of Bunnings Group, Michael Schneider. Michael leads one of Australia's biggest and most recognisable brands with more than 350 sites and 55,000 staff. We'll hear a little bit more from him about what ESG means to Bunnings and how they maintain this focus in what is often a complex and ever-shifting environment. We'll go now to Managing Director of the Bunnings Group, Mike Schneider.
And thank you so much for the invitation to address the ESG Future Foundation event. It's no secret that young Australians are increasingly aware of the environmental challenges that we face, and that there's an expectation that businesses act and act responsibly. At Bunnings, we take this responsibility very seriously and recognise the role that we play in making a positive difference through a range of impactful actions. We are committed to reducing the environmental impact of our operations and helping our customers live more sustainably in their homes and gardens. Today, I'd like to share how Bunnings is taking meaningful steps towards a more sustainable future, both in our operations and the communities in which we live and work. We're doing this through a number of strategic programs, and I'll share with you more about Bunnings' story relating to the following themes. Firstly, climate change and energy. Second, the circular economy. 3, ethical sourcing. 4, responsible timber sourcing. And 5, community engagement. To expand on the topic of climate change and energy, earlier this year, Bunnings reached a major milestone. 100% renewable electricity now powers all 450 plus sites across our Australian and New Zealand network. We announced this target back in 2020, and our team has worked really hard to deliver on this promise. The 100% renewable electricity achievement is part of a broader commitment that we have to reach net zero Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030. To help us get there, we've installed over 180 rooftop solar systems, generating up to 30% of each store's energy needs, and have secured long-term agreements with solar, wind and hydro power providers. We've adopted new store designs to improve our energy efficiency, such as through enhanced insulation, heating and cooling systems, LED lighting, and we've begun the rollout of electric fleet vehicles for our team members on the road. We've also begun trialling electric vehicle charging stations in selected sites in our network in Victoria, New South Wales, Western Australia and New Zealand to help our customers charge up while they shop. These efforts reflect a deep understanding that climate change is not optional, it's essential. Now, the second area that I'd like to highlight is the work that we're doing around the circular economy. Together with our suppliers as well as industry partners, we continue to work towards reducing the impact of our operations, but also promoting a circular economy. This includes things like improving packaging design and recyclability, participating in the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, and also the soft plastic recycling scheme over in New Zealand. We're also adopting the Australasian recycling label to help customers to recycle correctly. And we're also providing accessible and simple solutions to help customers handle difficult to recycle items. Additionally, we've introduced product stewardship programs, including things like battery recycling across all our stores, with over 1,000 tonnes collected so far. Plastic plant pot reuse and recycling at over 240 of our stores. And initiatives like these do help our customers to make more sustainable choices and, of course, to reduce landfill. Doing business the right way is imperative for Bunnings, and that takes us to the next focus area, which is, of course, ethical sourcing. As a business with hundreds of thousands of products and suppliers from Australia, New Zealand and all around the world, we operate in a complex global supply chain system. Importantly, we recognise the role that we play in upholding human rights and empowering workers through our ethical sourcing program, which includes things like monitoring of supply chains, working conditions such as thorough risk assessments, independent audits and remediation activities. There's also a grievance mechanism called Your Voice Worker Helpline, allowing factory workers to raise concerns and provide feedback confidentially. A worker callback service enabling workers to have confidential conversations with a third-party auditor to gather feedback directly from those workers. In the 2025 financial year, Bunnings conducted over 630 independent audits and expanded the Your Worker Helpline to over 550 participating factories. These efforts help ensure fair treatment, safe working conditions and transparency across our supply chain. The next area of focus involves ensuring that our products are sourced responsibly, and that's a priority for Bunnings, and our responsible timber sourcing policy reflects this commitment. At Bunnings, we require all timber from natural forests to be certified by independent third-party schemes, such as the Forest Stewardship Council or the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification. We continue to partner with our suppliers to improve sourcing practices and use tools like our timber survey to ensure that we know the origins of the timber and fibre in all of our products. Finally, Bunnings is deeply committed to supporting the communities that we serve through our hands-on help, fundraising and meaningful partnerships. Across Australia and New Zealand, Bunnings team members regularly assist their communities with local projects, from garden makeovers to volunteering at aged care homes and, of course, schools. Last financial year alone, Bunnings supported over 77,000 community activities, contributing more than 67 million Australian dollars to local groups. Our iconic community barbecue helps raise funds for everything from disability centres to rural fire services, local sporting clubs, schools and community groups. Nationally, Bunnings backs major causes like Vitamin D and Share the Dignity and provides vital support during natural disasters, including flood relief efforts with the Salvation Army. We also run initiatives like Trade Skills for Teens, empowering young Australians with practical skills and a sense of community contribution. Put simply, Bunnings isn't just a hardware store, we're a community partner trying to make a real difference through these various strategies and programs. Of course, we have a range of employment skills and capabilities across our 55,000 strong workforce, and we encourage a culture of diverse thinking that empowers our team members to contribute ideas that enhance sustainability across all of our operations. In bringing my presentation to a close, Bunnings is proving that sustainability isn't just something we do because it's right, it is a business and commercial imperative. Through reducing our operational emissions, embedding circular practices, ethical and responsible sourcing and community engagement, Bunnings is working really hard to build a future that's cleaner, fairer and more resilient. As we look ahead, it's clear that companies like Bunnings will play a vital role in shaping a sustainable Australia and New Zealand, not just for today, but for generations to come. Thanks so much for your time and best wishes with your programs.
A really great case study there of a company taking ESG action across the span of its operations. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Annabelle Acton. Annabelle is a partner at Maestro Talent and is an expert in the future of work, talent development, and innovative workforce solutions. She describes herself as a strategist on a mission to inject creativity into commerciality. I like that. And brings a fresh perspective on preparing today's workforce for tomorrow's challenges. Please join me in welcoming Annabelle Acton.
Let's get this right. Way down. Hi everybody. So I'm here to talk about the future of work. So it's a pretty big topic, it's a pretty loaded topic, and it's certainly one that's getting a lot of media attention at the moment as a result of AI. And I'd argue that a lot of that attention is quite negative, a lot of it's quite fear-based as well. On the plus side, it's giving way to some pretty good content. So this was a little meme I found that I quite liked. So what do you see yourself doing in 10 years? Work that can't be done by AI. I think we all probably feel that. And then also this one, which is a bit more dystopian, a bit scarier, kind of hinting at hyper-surveillance and an absolute focus on productivity above all else. So maybe a little bit scarier. But as someone that's working pretty close to talent-related stuff, these are the sorts of questions I'm hearing a lot about. So, well, what jobs are actually going to be left? What skills are really going to matter? And also, what's actually going to be the role of work in our lives? How are we going to relate to it? What's it going to be its purpose? Anyone got any other questions that are popping you want to share? Are they all in the negative realm? Okay, we'll move on. I am going to skip all those questions anyway, and I'm going to start with a story. And this story starts in New York in 2010. And I've just moved to New York. I've got a great job as an innovation consultant. I've got a great apartment, got great friends, I've got a great boyfriend. What could go wrong, right? Well, the year goes by really quickly, as good years tend to, and then suddenly it's Christmas. And my boyfriend has asked me to go back to London and have Christmas with his family. And then 5 days before Christmas, he breaks up with me. And I go from looking like happy 2010 pre-negative comment section of the internet vibes to an amalgamation of these sorts of images. So as I'm in my apartment, thinking about these plane tickets to London that I don't want anymore, I start thinking about all these other things that I have that I don't want anymore. So jewelry my ex had bought me, he bought me concert tickets to a concert coming up in February that I wouldn't want to go to without him. And I started thinking, you know what, wouldn't it be good if there was a place where you could sell all the stuff that reminds you of your ex, make some cash, and then use that cash to buy something that's going to make you feel great. And with that, my first startup, Never Liked It Anyway, was born. So Never Liked It Anyway, I called it the eBay for breakups, and it really was there to help you offload all your breakup baggage, make some cash and buy something that's actually going to make you feel good. And I launched it, and it started to take off. So I had people jumping on, selling all sorts of stuff from engagement rings to wedding dresses. I had someone selling a Buick, I had someone selling a Harley Davidson. I even had someone selling a bottle of ketchup. There's a whole story behind that. But it started to happen. Got quite a bit of press attention, so this was a picture of me in Grazia magazine. I snuck in as the 10th hot story of the week. J-Lo pipped me at number 9 next time. And it got to a point where it made sense to quit my job and really focus on the opportunities that Never Liked It Anyway were opening up. So I moved to LA, I managed to get a book deal, I got a product deal, I got a TV deal, and it was really a fun time. And all the way through, I continued working as a brand and innovation consultant, but on a freelance basis. And this model really worked for me. This was a way that I could secure income, and it meant that I could say yes to things like taking a book deal, because unless you're a really known author, an advance is not really enough to keep you going. But this model really worked, and I felt that those years were some of the happiest and most productive and most creatively fulfilling of my life. Now, flash forward to 2025, and there's a word for this model, and that is fractional work. And fractional work, for those who aren't familiar with the term, is essentially when you swoop into an organization on a needs basis. It can look like a couple of days a week on an ongoing basis. It can look like a short-term contract, or it can even look like an interim role for a couple of years while the organization really figures out what it needs. And I very much believe that this is the future of work. And this is something that I feel very strongly about, and so does my business partner here, Pete. Give us a wave. So much so that Pete and I launched a business at the beginning of the year called Maestro. And Maestro is a fractional talent platform, so we're really here to promote this way of working. So we've had over 5,000 people apply to be maestros that really want to bring their expertise into organizations and work in this fractional capacity. And then we connect those into clients at scale-ups, at corporates. And the proposition really is about bringing in the exact right expert at the exact right time and really staying agile in the process. Something that Pete and I talk about a lot is that we're here to change the way the world works. And on that note, does anyone know who this is? Yes. Does anyone know what he's famous for other than being an automotive legend? Oh, I don't know that story, but... so he was actually one of the earliest proponents of the 9 to 5. So before he came along, people were actually working 10 to 16-hour days, so super long days, and he came along and said, you know what, we can actually shorten those hours, get more productivity, increase effectiveness, and obviously increase employee morale, satisfaction, and retention. And of course, all of those things are good for business. But if we flash forward 99 years, the 9 to 5 is still the default model, and this is, as I say, something that Pete and I feel quite strongly about shaking up. So when we think about the fractional way of working, it's pretty easy to understand why talent love it. So for talent, you get more freedom, there's more flexibility, there's more variety, and you're also able to deliver impact without really having to worry. So you're not trying to get a promotion, you don't really worry about ruffling feathers, you're just there to do a really good job. And we also know from a lot of the future of work reports that are coming out just how much people are prioritising things like well-being and also time to commit to their passion projects or whatever it is that lights them up outside of work, whether that's family commitments, as I say, passion projects, learning, travel, it could be anything really, but as long as there's time and ways to be able to support your interests, that's something that we know is really happening for talent. But then on the company side, it really makes sense as well. So the first point here is that it gives you access to elite. So oftentimes we find that these people that are really focused and specialised in what they do, they don't really want to work full time or they're incredibly expensive. But this gives you access to the right talent at the right time. The second point is there's increased innovation and problem solving capabilities. So again, being able to get someone exactly when you need them, and then you can keep subbing in exactly who you need when you need them, and it really helps to uplift the team. The next is instant agility. It's probably not a huge surprise that if we think about how quickly business is changing, the companies that are going to stay ahead and really get an edge are the ones that can respond really quickly to market dynamics. And by being able to put either a fractional expert or a team of fractional experts on an opportunity without having to distract your core team, it's going to be something that's going to become a huge competitive advantage. Oh. Sorry, I've gone back. Lastly, there's less cost and less risk with this model. So again, you're paying for exactly what you need and less risk if it doesn't work out. There's not a lengthy procurement process to manage someone out or performance manage someone out. It's something that can be ended quite swiftly. There's also an element of team upskilling. So when we send in a maestro, they don't just get the job done, but they bring in this momentum, this dynamism, this energy that helps to really uplift the team around them. So it's almost like a hands-on training. And lastly, it really lets leaders lead. So if we think about the depth of complexity now across so many different businesses, being able to free leaders up to focus on the visionary stuff while they're supported by fractional experts that can really understand the depth of knowledge, we know that that's going to be a huge value add as well. So if we go back to the original, not the original questions, this is just showing some support for this way of working. So we know that it's increasing both in the US and in Australia. So we're seeing some positive momentum both in the statistics, but Pete and I anecdotally in what we're seeing in terms of businesses responding to this way of working. And then finally, back to the original question. So is AI going to actually take all the jobs? Is that something we should actually be afraid of? And I put it to you that I don't think this is actually the right question. I think the right question is really, are we going to have the confidence to redesign the way we work to actually support the future of work and better lives? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle, for that excellent presentation on the future of work. I think it's great to think about how we can break the mold of the 9 to 5, including through fractional work, and it was really great to learn more about the work you're doing through Maestro Talent, so thank you very much. Our next speaker is Peter Tsai. Peter is the CEO of the Museum of Chinese in Australia and former CEO of the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations. He's a respected leader in cross-cultural relations and will tell us more about the geopolitical risk management as part of ESG governance and leadership. Please welcome Peter Tsai.
Thank you, Megan, for your introduction. When Jason asked me to speak at this year's ESG conference, I was flattered, but at the same time quite nervous. What exactly should I talk about? And what advice, if any, could I give to aspiring graduates entering the workforce at a time when the global economy is under pressure from climate change, populist upheavals, geopolitical fractures, and the rapidly advancing AI technology? Though I have worked in corporate governance, both at ASX-listed company and large government departments, I have decided not to bore you with stories about nominee shareholder protocols or the director accountability. Instead, I want to focus on different aspects of ESG. Today, I want to talk about geopolitical risk or geoeconomics. There are different names for it. And I'm also very glad Gary Humphrey actually mentioned in his previous speeches about geopolitical risk. Back in April 2021, during the depths of the COVID-19 and the escalating Australia-China trade war, it feels like a distant memories now. I wrote a piece for Australian Financial Review titled "Doing Business in a Divided World." Unlike many things I've written before, this one has aged surprisingly well. In that column, I argued that geopolitical risks such as war, tariffs, and export control are no longer just background noise or even theoretical possibilities. They are now central features of global commerce. Take example, Russian invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. And many European political and business leaders do not believe that a conventional war in continental Europe was possible. They've proven to be wildly wrong. And consequently, a lot of German and European industrial companies in Europe need to go through fundamental restructure of their business because of their previous dependency on Russian energy. And because of that, this geopolitical risk demand a greater attention and more creative response, not just from government officials, but also from business leaders and even mid-level managers. And under the second Trump administration, this challenge has become a daily occurrence. One day, it is the skyrocketing tariff. Under the beautiful name Liberation Day tariff, the next is $700,000 fine or visa fee for your most prized IT professional. It will have a big impact on professionals working in Silicon Valley. And for years, Australian companies have made money without paying too much attention to geopolitical risk, unless you're in airline industry or energy company. I have some personal experience in that, working at Australia's second largest airline, Virgin Australia, because a missile strike in Middle East, especially Saudi Arabian oil refinery, can say to the hard pulse of the CFO very fast, because energy were responsible, aviation fuel were responsible 40% of airlines' cost. But apart from that, not many companies were too particularly concerned about geopolitical risk. But the geopolitical landscape are shifting, and multinational are increasingly caught in the crosshairs. Take the banks as an example. For a very long time, bankers will only have to worry about terrorist organization in very few countries. But nowadays, there's a proliferation of the sanctioned entities, from companies, from very large companies, to small technology suppliers. So bankers have to increasingly pay attention to sanction lists prepared by government around the country, particularly that of the United States. Another example, cross-strait relationship between mainland China and Taiwan has presented a new kind of headache for corporate executives. Previously, airlines and the hotels have to worry about whether to list Taiwan as a separate region on the booking side, because it is actually a very big issue. But nowadays, the worry about whether a conflict could break out presents a far greater issue. Taiwan is home to the world's most advanced manufacturing, fabrication sites run by TSMC, and the chips from TSMC power everything from smartphone, electrical vehicles, even to military drones.
a catastrophic kinetic conflict over Taiwan could become have a far greater consequence anything we could ever imagine. And this is actually a live risk. In some of my previous jobs, a lot of senior directors of companies, CFOs, and chief risk officers have asked this question repeatedly. So this is not just a concern amongst the diplomats or Defense Department officials. So apart from China and the US aren't the only geopolitical flashpoints. Take Southeast Asia as an example. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a military coup in Myanmar.
Not long ago, when Myanmar was under the leadership of Aung San Suu Kyi, was actually a rising economic star in Southeast Asia region. Australian giants like Woodside Petroleum actually had extensive drilling operations in the Myanmar's water. When the coup happened, the company decided to pull out its entire operation, as well as another large Australian company, Bank ANZ. So, board must think geopolitically. All this point to one reality: Australian board and executive must take geopolitical risk far more seriously. It's not just enough to monitor domestic risk like industrial relations and regulatory compliance. Risk metrics need a serious update to account for rapidly shifting global landscape. For example, the technology war between the US and China has fundamentally reshaped the global telecommunication industry. Australian telcos like Optus, Vodafone, and TPG were forced to cut ties with their long-term supplier Huawei over national security concern. TPG even scrapped its plan to build a mobile phone network because of that. It is actually a preview of what is to come, especially as China becomes a global powerhouse in emerging technologies, from AI to green technology. Let's take a more practical example: fleet procurement. If you're a procurement manager at a fleet management company with government clients, the issue whether your EVs, where EVs are made, is no longer an academic issue. Chinese-made EVs are now outselling their rivals in Australia. They are cheap, effective, and abundant. But a procurement decision comes with geopolitical implications. It is not just the performance or price. Company must navigate US sanctions regimes, which include ever-expanding list of Chinese technology companies. In fact, in the United States and other places, Chinese EVs are banned for national security reasons. Similarly, in China, Tesla can't enter certain government compounds because of the very advanced features. So corporate lawyers and the risk manager must not regularly consult notice from the once obscure Bureau for Industry and Security of the Department of Commerce in Washington. At the same time, Chinese Ministry of Commerce is also developing a similar program, both with extraterritorial application. So the tug of war between American and China's regulatory system is becoming a new reality for global business. I want to talk about another issue, about the companies increasingly need to adopt a kind of splitting personalities. So, for example, Japanese company, Japanese electronic giant, Panasonic, for example, has created a separate China Northeast Asia division. CEO Tetsuro Hidoma is contemplating whether to relocate the company's entire applicants' headquarters or lease some of the core function to China. I don't think the Japanese manufacturing industry can survive globally without being present in a market as big as China. But the sensitive technologies like industrial robotics will remain in Japan. Still, no one really knows if these efforts will satisfy increasingly demanding regulations in both countries. Another example is TikTok. I'm sure many of you probably have TikToks on your app, but definitely not on a government's app, government-issued phones. So TikTok, owned by Chinese technology giant ByteDance, offers another example. So when the first Trump administration threatened to ban TikTok in the US, the company actually offered to spin off its American operation into a new company. Partly owned by American investors, including Oracle, it will be headquartered in the United States with Oracle overseeing its data security. But during the first Trump administration, during the Biden administration, was considered not adequate to cover all the national security concerns because also to do with the control of the algorithm. So the US Congress even passed a law to ban TikTok unless its Chinese parent company agreed to surrender the control of this algorithm. And also similarly, in China actually passed a regulation that put export control on its advanced algorithm technology. And the subject of the intense trade negotiation right now between Washington and Beijing is really centered around some algorithm that power the powerful TikTok, which is very popular amongst the US youth. So the TikTok is a story about just how difficult it is to straddle two competing superpower. I know this is a conference about ESG, so I will just end my note talking about renewable energy dilemma. So, China is undisputed leader in renewable energy. And just to take solar as an example, just in the first 6 months of 2025, China installed more than 250 gigawatts of solar capacity. That is more than the total installed capacity of the United States. It's also the total, twice the total capacity of Germany. A decade ago, the decision to import and mass-produce low-cost Chinese solar panels would be a no-brainer. But today is a different story. There are a lot of concerns about national security, over-dependency on the supply, especially even at a time when government and corporations are supposed to and also kind of facing the challenge of meeting some very ambitious net zero targets, because the geopolitical concerns are really complicating government and corporations' decisions whether to adopt some cheap and readily available energy. And this is a decision that many companies will face. Even if you decide to go for an option, a Chinese-made solar panel, sometimes you have to deal with the practical difficulties to find a lawyer who's prepared to sign off on things such as forced labor protocols. So these are very difficult challenges not only policy makers have to face, but also procurement managers. In conclusion, what does all this mean for you, especially those who are just entering the workforce? It means understanding geopolitics is no longer just for diplomats and for foreign policy wonks. It is now central to understand how business works and how business operate, invest, procure, and manage risk. Whether you're in finance, law, tech, supply chain, or ESG, your job will be shaped by global chessboard in which previous generation never had to consider, at least for those start their career after the fall of the Berlin Wall. The world is just interconnected, it's also fragmented, and navigating that contradiction will be one of the defining challenges of your careers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, for teaching us about the critical importance of geopolitical risk in ESG leadership. And thank you for reaching our younger audience with the TikTok example, a really fascinating example playing out before us right now. Our next speaker is Stephen Anderson, Global Manager at Penfolds Evermore. Stephen is committed to using business as a force for good, supporting thriving communities through innovative business practices. Let's welcome Stephen Anderson.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Really exciting to be with you all today. So today I'm going to talk through a little bit about our Penfolds Evermore program, as well as the importance of implementing theory of change models and social impact frameworks to support these programs. And I do apologise in advance. I've actually started losing my voice over the last few days, which is really apt timing, but we'll see how we go. So our Penfolds Evermore program is our global community and sustainability platform. So it's how we make a positive contribution to the people, places and communities that Penfolds is connected to. So for our brand, that is where we make wine. So we make wine in Australia, France, China, and the USA. So you can think of this program as our equivalent of an ESG or CSR program. So how are we giving back to create a thriving world for future generations? Now, to ensure the program is really focused, we built this program and we have 3 key thematics or key strategic pillars that really drive everything we do. And so these are community and culture, future winemaking, and towards sustainability. And so while building this program and having these pillars is really great, it demonstrates how we like to use business as a force for good, helps us deliver our work and drive our efforts. It's also really important that within these programs we are wrapping things like a social impact framework around this platform. So how are we measuring on our activities? How are we reporting back our outcomes and our impacts that we deliver? So we will touch on our social impact framework in a moment on the next slide. But you can start to see how in everything we do, we try to make sure our social impact outcomes are weaved into all of our work. So you can see on the bottom here, under our pillars, that everything we do, we invest in, we hope to see or create change that supports thriving communities, a thriving industry, and a thriving world. And so today I'll actually just focus on our community and culture pillar when we talk through our social impact framework, as well as examples of a theory of change. So here is our impact framework. And so this framework is our structured approach to how we plan, manage, measure and communicate the positive efforts or even the negative efforts of the work that we deliver that is supporting positive social and environmental outcomes. So to build this framework, so we looked at our mission and our vision, or our purpose, you can see here, and understood what our overarching goal and what we would like to deliver and see the change that we hope to create under this program. So for social impact, we're looking at things such as behavioural knowledge or a social change as a direct result from the work that we do. So if we look at the impact framework here on this first side, we have our thematic, which is our community and culture pillar, and the description. So what are we looking to deliver and what are we going to do? We then move down the framework and we're looking at the change that we hope to create. So we would like to see that we're supporting communities that are connected to Penfolds to thrive. And the ways we do this, or the change that we try to do, is are we strengthening that connection between the community and Penfolds, or other things such as are we supporting the increase to access of cultural experiences. And so if we do all these things, we then progress down the framework and we see that impact that we hope to create, which is thriving communities. And so wrapped up in this even further, and we don't have the time to touch on it now, is a MEL framework, so a measurement and evaluation framework. And this really helps us report on and measure if we're actually having a positive shift and moving towards that goal of a thriving community. And also importantly is this bottom one here, and what it means for our business as well. And so if we're delivering under these pillars and we're able to create this impact and change in those 3 areas, we hope to then see a thriving business. And for us, that means that we might see our brand awareness shift, our customer and consumer sentiment hopefully become more positive, and our brand salience increase. And so when developing a social impact framework, what are the things we're looking for? So firstly, it's my belief that all ESG or CSR programs should always have a social impact framework intertwined. It really helps drive your efforts, but also, as I mentioned, really measure the deliverables and the outcomes of your program. And so when you are delivering or creating a social impact framework, you want to be clear on your mission and your vision. And so what are you looking to achieve? Do you have a set focus area? Does it align with your business? And also, are you realistically able to achieve that? So for example, for us, we built our social impact framework and built this program, but then we also realised that under our community and culture pillar, that we actually need to be far more refined in how we are driving that pillar and delivering those outcomes, and identified we actually need to develop a community strategy which really helps us focus our efforts and our outcomes when it comes to charitable partnerships and supporting not-for-profits as well. Which leads me to the next point, is you want your activity to be measurable and creating meaningful change. And so a social impact framework really helps you explain the why you are doing something and support your program growth, particularly internally. So if you are, say for these programs, seeking more funding or even pushing back on an idea that has come from the business around what you could be doing under the program, social impact framework really helps you explain the how or how something does not align to your program and maybe isn't worth that investment. I think always focusing on outcomes and impacts first when building your social impact framework and then working backwards really helps support the build of these programs. So for example, if a project is new or has been proposed, are you asking yourself what is the change that you hope to create or the change that you hope to see? And if you're able to answer those questions, you're then able to work back and go, do we have capacity to support this? Do we have the funding? What are the activities we'll actually be delivering to support that change? Which then leads on to developing a theory of change, which is another important layer to add to any project or program. So a theory of change is the strategic roadmap that explains the how and why a desired outcome is expected to happen in a particular context. So it connects your activities to your long-term goals by outlining the step-by-step logic that needs to happen for the change. So if the social impact framework is how we measure and report, a theory of change is that explanation of cause and effect, the how we do something and the why, and we'll run through an example of that in a moment. And so here is an example of a program that was recently delivered that shows some really strong social impact outcomes. So here we're seeing some behavioural as well as knowledge change. So this project is the B&B Highway, and they were an inaugural grant recipient of our Penfolds Evermore Australia Grant Program. And so Planting Seeds project received funding to introduce the first pollinator corridors into South Australia to support local biodiversity through their flagship program, the B&B Highway. So in addition to this structure here that you see, they also run a number of workshops for their local community to educate them on the importance of biodiversity and pollinators and the role they play in the environment and the ecosystem. And so we gathered data from the more than 250 participants who have taken part in these workshops to date, and we can see that we have some really strong outcomes here. So we've had 100% of participants report an increase in knowledge and understanding of biodiversity. Over 92% saw an increase in their knowledge and understanding of pollinators, and 81% felt more inspired to incorporate native plants into their own environments. So we have some really strong demonstrations of both knowledge increase, so that 100% and 92.9% increasing their knowledge in biodiversity and pollinators, as well as a behavioural shift with participants wanting to incorporate native plants into their own space. And so we can see from these results that we're shifting that dial a little, where we're now delivering on the thriving communities. People are becoming more educated and supporting where they live, as well as even the thriving world, our last pillar, that we're supporting the environment. And here is a live example actually of a theory of change for a program that we'll be launching next month. So we're supporting a local NGO in Ningxia, China, who are supporting the capacity building of the local Ningxia community. And so the program over the next 6 months will support the delivery of 15 workshops that support the capacity building, particularly literacy and business skills of people within that community. What's really great about this program is not only do these individuals get to participate in the program and hopefully feel more empowered with the skills that they gain, but they actually get to work with this organisation who helps them hopefully find some meaningful employment as well as set up their own small businesses. So if we use a theory of change for this program, we can really demonstrate the social change that we're looking to create and the outcomes and impacts of this program. So if we start with our input, somehow all the information's up there, don't know what happened, but if this was your theory of change, the first top one is input. And so if we start with our input, that's our funding, that's how we're supporting this project financially. If we move down, we then have our activity, and so this is what we're doing. And so in this case, we're delivering 15 workshops over the next 6 months. And if we move to our outputs of the program, so that's the number of participants who take part in the program. And this is sometimes where people stop or don't progress their measurement or theory of change. They think that the outputs are actually the outcomes and impacts, which is not the case. Your outputs are very different things. So they are the quantities or the tangible products and services that are delivered from your activity. So if we get past that stage, we're able to move to that part where we're demonstrating that real that change and the shift in the dial. So we move to our outcomes. And so in this instance, that's the number of participants who might find meaningful employment or able to set up their own small businesses. And then we then shift ultimately to our impacts, which is that change that we hope to see. So in this case, we hope we might see a reduction in local unemployment, as well as empowered individuals through their new skills. So this is a great program that demonstrates the importance of theory of change and gives us a testable hypothesis grounded in evidence about how this change can happen within a program. And again, ties back to our social impact framework of how we can then be supporting thriving communities, but also having measurable, meaningful data that demonstrates where we're creating that change. And so if we bring it back to our framework, so for us, our Evermore program, it helps us drive activities and programs to support people, places and communities we're connected to. Our social impact framework allows us to align our activities to our program pillars and to ensure we're delivering behavioural, knowledge and social change. And our theory of change on certain programs and activities allows us to take a strategic approach to the projects and measure their performance, outcomes and impacts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that overview of Penfold's approach and for giving us some really great guidance on how to build a social impact framework. And I know that it's a great excuse for me to go and buy more Penfold's wine, so thank you. We're going to break shortly for afternoon tea, but before we do, we have a very special signing ceremony between Federation University and Green S. Green S is dedicated to advancing clean energy solutions with a focus on battery storage systems, solar integration and energy digitisation. They partner with leading research institutions and stakeholders to deliver innovative technologies that support the transition to a low carbon economy. And from today, that includes a new MOU with Federation University, which will help embed ESG principles in our qualifications while giving students hands-on experience. It will allow Green S and Federation University to be partners at the cutting edge of research into renewable green energy. Before I welcome our guests to the stage, we're going to hear a little bit more about Green S. Now to undertake the signing ceremony, I welcome Ms. Chong from Federation University and Mr. Young and Mr. Chang from Green S to the stage for the signing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. My name is Li Yang, and I'm a director at Green ESS. It is a true honor to be here today, supported by the ESG Future Foundation and the Federation University, to celebrate not just a partnership, but shared vision for a sustainable future. At Green ESS, we believe in one simple idea: harness the sun, harness the future. Instead of focusing only on batteries, at Green ESS, we are building something more ambitious, a home energy hub. It is more than storage. It is a bridge between homes and communities, indoors and outdoors. this is not only about technology, but about way of life, energy freedom. That is why our partnership with Federation University is so important. Together, we will support students with internships, training, and real projects, advanced research in renewable energy and battery projects, and promote innovation that benefits industries and communities. This is not just about technology. It is about people, preparing students for the future workforce and creating solutions that serve society. The young brings energy and ideas. The experienced bring vision and responsibility. Together, we move forward. On behalf of Green ESS, I thank Federation University and the ESG Future Foundation for your commitment. I believe together we can inspire innovation, drive a cleaner future, and bring green energy to every corner of life. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. For us at Federation University, it's wonderful to be able to co-host today's forum, and it's a really exciting day for us to be able to sign this MOU with Green S. As my colleague has mentioned, it's going to enable us to provide wonderful opportunities for our students in our cooperative education model with internships, with industry-led projects, and also to be able to partner in research and development and in training. So Federation University's roots date back to 155 years. We've been connected to industry from day one, when we started out as a School of Mines in Ballarat. And for us to partner with a young, innovative company like Green S, it's wonderful to see the development that we can have and we can participate together into the future. So thank you very much.
While we just have the last of those photos, I'll let everyone know we're about to go to afternoon tea break at the moment. We'll come back at 2:30, but I've been asked to remind everyone there is a silent auction, so please do find that table or our staff can direct you there and check out the items that are up for grabs. Thank you, we'll go to break now. Thanks everyone, and sorry we are running a little bit behind time. We had a really jam-packed first half and we've got a few more really compelling presentations to get through. We heard from our next speaker earlier today, and now he's back to share his perspective on ESG and the skills gap and what universities like Federation University Australia are doing to help fill it. Please welcome Vice Chancellor and President of Federation University Australia, Professor Duncan Bentley.
Thank you very much, Megan, and again, thank you to all of you who are here, both in person and online across the globe. We are all here together where each of us is part of a global shift to ensure a positive future for our people and our planet. Earlier speakers discussed the different aspects of the ESG challenges, the opportunities in companies and societies. And true to our ethos of transforming lives and enhancing communities, Federation University joins you in that same purpose and that passion. I don't need to convince any of you of the critical importance of ESG, and the ambitions of ESG have never mattered more. Last week we saw in Australia the latest National Climate Change Risk Assessment, which paints a challenging and confronting view of the future for our nation. Some contest the pace of the change. However, what is critically important, as Minister Chris Bowen of Australia described, the scientific evidence shows that the impacts of climate change will be cascading, compounding, and concurrent. And they impact everything from our environment to our economy to the health and well-being of our people. And for many of our students and communities, though, the impacts of climate change and the need for environmental sustainability right across every aspect of our society, they're not merely future projections, but they are the lived reality of our lives here and now. At our Gippsland campus and in Western Victoria in the Wimmera, we are living the energy transition. For our students and communities, as Michael Schneider said as he gave his talk about Bunnings, and as we heard about the Penfolds Evermore program, the question is not what will be the impact of climate change, but what are we actually going to do about it? And we see that in our students, where rural and regional students are already navigating drought, fire and flood. Each year we close our campuses for one of those elements across regional Victoria. International students we host are seeing the impacts of climate change quite literally lapping at the doorstep of their communities. Mature students are leaving behind well-established jobs and careers and coming to us because they want to be part of future solutions. So our role is not only to prepare students for the future, it's to help shape the future for our students. Our students entering in 2030 should be proud of what we have done now here in 2025. For universities are uniquely placed at the intersection of research and knowledge and community. We can make a tangible and immediate difference, and we can measure that impact, much as the Penfolds Evermore project focuses on that impact. But what we must do even further is to replicate that across communities, both domestically and internationally, so that the impact can again be continual and growing and concurrent. Lauren Jacob, who's one of our students on our panel, is doing her PhD on how thoughtful planning and environmental sustainability can create more nature-positive communities? How do we practically live with and not in opposition to our natural environment? That's what we're studying now, to make sure that we have an impact which is tangible and realizable. Another one of our PhD students, Bola Paudel, who is here in the room, is working with farmers to understand how they can innovate and implement and pilot ESG now in their farming operations. Bola's study aims to develop a farm-level ESG tool that can be used by farmers to first quantify their ESG impact, but also how that knowledge can be used every single day to improve the practice on their farms. We're talking about real-life, current ESG impact now, not just in major corporations, but in small and medium-sized employers right across our communities. These two examples are where the work of Federation shines brightest, when research meets real-world impact for our communities. It's also within the field of ESG where universities as a whole can play a really important role in bringing government, industry and communities together. A powerful example of that is the work of Dr. Jess Reeves, Senior Lecturer in Environmental Science, who will be on the panel shortly. Around the world, previously resource-dependent communities are having to undergo substantive transformation. How these communities engage with and respond to these transitions is dependent on a complex range of factors, including how they are given a voice. And Jess has therefore worked in partnership with the CSIRO, with mine operators, with local residents, and the Cooperative Research Centre for Transformations in Mining Economies, and synthesised the community's vision for the future uses of the land surrounding the Latrobe Valley's coal mines. Over 2.5 and more years, more than 100 participants have shared their aspirations for their community, from biodiversity to housing to future industries, and importantly, this vision that they developed was not imposed from above, but in partnership with the communities themselves. And it's a model for how we at Federation see ESG working, not as boxes to tick, but a framework for real-world impact for people, for places, and for our planet. We see the same commitment at work in our Asia Pacific Renewable Energy Training Centre, where Jess's project is about reimagining the use of land after coal. APRATEC, the Asia Pacific Renewable Energy Training Centre, is about reimagining the future of energy and the workforce that will deliver it, in partnership with employers like Green S. Based at our Mount Helen and Gippsland campuses, APRATEC hosts the Southern Hemisphere. This is the first in the Southern Hemisphere wind turbine training tower and apprenticeship scheme. You might wonder why on earth it's taken so long for it to happen. But someone had to start, and that will then be the catalyst for the empowering students through that 23-metre high facility, training up to 600 wind industry workers each year. The technicians, the innovators, the engineers, who will ensure that Australia reaches its renewable energy targets. This is the opposite of what critics sometimes dismiss ESG as just corporate jargon or feel-good window dressing. What we're trying to do is deliver real-world outcomes, to prepare the next generation of workers supporting the next generation of jobs, powered by AI, and ensuring strong futures for the regional communities we serve so that they are thriving and driving jobs and economic growth for our regional and rural communities. Federation University was the first in Australia to commit to the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and today we've been ranked among the top 10% of universities globally for overall sustainable development by the latest Times Higher Education University Impact Rankings. Rankings are fine, but the reality is behind those rankings. The goals themselves are fine, but what is the local impact? We're proud of our gender equality and that we are recognised for strong representation of first-generation female students, inclusive access measures, a high proportion of female academics, and leading research in gender equity. It's the actual feet on the ground and the things that matter where lives are being changed which is important. We love the fact that we're being recognised for our partnerships for the goals. As we've seen today in this room, Federation's cooperative education model is a partnership-driven approach that embeds industry collaboration into every aspect of learning and teaching and research, but ensures that everything we do translates back into our partners so that they can thrive and they can succeed. We're proud to be recognised for reducing inequality, recognising inequalities and increasing access to education for regional communities, because that's what the heart of what we do is, why we were established as a university for Victoria's regions. And our commitment to equity is evidenced in the #1 ranking in Australia for first-generation students. That's the first in their families to go on to post-secondary education. In Australia, in the 21st century, our level of participation is far too low. And unless we do something to change it, we will not be able to change and shape our planet. And I know that everyone online, in the communities you represent, that is something for which we are all passionate, because it's only together working in this way that we will be able to change our future. And so we have developed dedicated training and communities of practice, and when we talk about skilling the next generation of ESG leaders, this goes further because we're talking about skilling whole communities and the industries, the employers and the communities as a whole. And at Federation, we believe that a practical approach delivered in partnership, centred in real-world outcomes which are measurable, and where we measure the outcome, measure the impact, and make sure that the community voice is heard, is the way that we will be able to change the world, one graduate at a time, one research project at a time, but always together in partnership, we will be able to magnify that impact immeasurably. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Duncan. And as you can hear, we're very proud of the work of our colleagues, our students and our partners at Federation University Australia to have that impact. Our next guest speaker joins us remotely from Sydney, and we're really delighted to welcome him. Yair Ini is Managing Director of Data and AI at Accenture Technology ANZ. Yair is an expert in data transformation and AI with a strong track record in empowering ESG leaders through technology. And Federation University is very proud to have a developing and very exciting partnership with Accenture to ensure our students have these next generation skills for the challenges of tomorrow. Let's hear more from Yair. Can you hear us, Yair?
I can.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Yair Ini, and I'm the Managing Director in Accenture Technology's Data and AI team. Accenture is partnering with the Federation University to develop and grow our sovereign delivery centres here in Australia, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you all today. As leaders, you all know how important data and AI skills are. But today I want to show you why they are a critical component in making real impact with ESG, in moving from reporting to transformation and from observation to action. But first, let's see this incredible example of AI put into use to create a better environment. Can you play the video, please?
Underwater AI camera identifies fish species, calculates their exact weight, and detects early signs of disease, all without ever touching the fish. Tidal is a fishing technology startup revolutionizing salmon farming across the world's oceans. The project was born at Google's semi-secret research and development organization called X, where they fund moonshot ideas with the goal of solving some of the world's most difficult problems. Their cameras move autonomously throughout massive salmon enclosures, collecting over 50 million fish observations daily. The AI processes these images to measure fish weight with astonishing accuracy, detecting sea lice, wounds, and other health issues before they spread. An autonomous feeding system determines precisely how much food each pen needs, reducing waste that pollutes the ocean floor. With wild fisheries depleting and global protein demand soaring, sustainable aquaculture has become critical. Salmon produce 1 kilogram of body mass for every kilogram of feed, 8 times more efficient than cattle. This technology has already been deployed in over 700 fish pens worldwide, monitoring more than 50 million salmon throughout their growth cycles. Beyond aquaculture, Tidal's underwater perception systems are now being adapted to map carbon-storing seagrass beds and monitor offshore wind farms, potentially revolutionizing how we manage our oceans.
This is a simulation of Pong, the
Isn't it? Aquafarming is a mature, sophisticated business sector, but I'd like you to think about how much new information they'll now be able to uncover using autonomous cameras and visual machine learning. The solution we just saw effectively creates new data that wasn't available before. They've always known how much feed they're putting into the system, but not how much is actually being consumed. And instead of using sampling and lab analyses to detect diseases, they will now have near real-time data coming directly from the field. One thing about ESG is that tectonic shifts in the energy transition are happening under our feet and out of our control. On the one hand, massive emission sources are being phased out, and on the other, new sources of renewable energy are coming online. And most of us are observers in this, receiving policy settings set by government and able to influence only at the margins with the choices we make in the ballot box and with our purchasing decisions. But between these two forces, there's a vast middle, where we as leaders in our respective businesses can and must play our part and effect change in the way we conduct our business, in the way we grow our people and our talent, in the way we serve our customers, and in the way we choose and interact with our suppliers. This is a challenge that can only be solved with data and AI skills. Firstly, when it comes to ESG, a significant portion of meaningful data isn't readily available within existing operational systems. This information is often present only in the physical environment, needing AI solutions to turn it into meaningful data. Example of this is a regional UK water supply. Due to the geographical spread of its supply network, traditional monitoring technologies and processes were not effective. Instead, they co-designed and used an AI-powered solution that uses satellite imagery and surface aperture radar to detect and reduce leaks in the network, leading to a reduction in leakage of 2 million litres per day, the equivalent consumption of 8,000 homes. So just imagine the environmental impact. All that water no longer needs to be treated, with all that high energy cost to treat it. And also, that water can be released back to the natural environment and support biodiversity. The challenge is that much of the data we require isn't even in our control. For some businesses, the best way to make an impact is through influencing their suppliers rather than by changing their own internal behaviors. This can be true for our customers too. As a bank, for example, there can be no better way to make an impact than influencing your customers' emissions with targeted lending and incentives. But in the absence of standardized business-to-business reporting, much of this information is present in disclosure statements and other documents, but it can only be converted into meaningful data using AI-driven solutions. So, if you're a retail mortgage lender, for example, wanting to incentivize your clients to install solar panels, it would be very hard to get information from energy providers around which customers have solar installed. But some banks are now leveraging satellite imagery to identify households that have solar panels and combining it with data, for example, from Google's Project Sunroof, to drive solar panel adoption through mortgage incentives. And they're effectively reducing their finance emissions impact and making change in the behavior of their customers. And that's real. That's not just reporting about it, that's actually making an impact. I work for Accenture, and as a leader in data and AI, Accenture is well placed to help our clients do this, and I'd like to give you a few examples that bring this to life. We've worked with a very big e-commerce company, and we built them a solution that uses AI to analyze the diverse range of sustainability statements and reports from its suppliers. So using our AI-powered ESG 360 platform, we extracted information from different types and formats of documents, standardized the information into usable data, and gave our client a platform to better understand and transform the environmental impact of its supply chain. And this is an example of how AI is stitching public data together between many different organizations without them having to agree on data exchange formats and protocols, and ultimately benefiting not only our direct client, but also their ecosystem of partners. In another example, we worked together with Microsoft and with a major US gas distributor to reduce methane leakage from their distribution pipelines. Using satellite, fixed-wing, and drone sensor platforms to identify methane leaks, the information is collated and standardized in a cloud-based data platform. Analytics are then used to prioritize field service teams' response to identify and repair leaks in the network. Ultimately, this enables a significant reduction in methane leaks, which you probably know is one of the most harmful greenhouse gases. And here we can see how AI is used to create new information about the real world through that satellite and fixed plane imagery. And then AI is used again to change real world behavior by prioritizing and facilitating field work. Now, these are great examples, but the truth is that no one knows your business is better than you do, and no one understands better than you the opportunities that lie in how your teams, suppliers, and customers interact to make a positive impact. So you can't simply rely on external suppliers like us to bring all the solutions. To meet this challenge, it's imperative that you, today's leaders, and the people you hire and train, understand data and AI technologies and commit to an ongoing culture of learning. These skills will expand your understanding of what's possible and allow you to combine your knowledge of your world, your creativity, your energy, to find new ways of extracting data from your operations and make better decisions with it to drive a meaningful impact on the environment, on your workforce diversity, and on your business operations. In summary, data and AI technologies and skills are critical to being able to become deliberate and data-driven in reducing our environmental footprint, in diversifying our workforces, and in understanding and tracking our behaviors. And while technology providers like Accenture can and will play a large role in enabling this, also well placed to identify these opportunities and create this change. So I implore you, grow your data and AI skills personally and in your existing teams, and work together with institutions like Federation University to build the cooperative training that combines technology skills and the knowledge of your business, and make sure that the next generation of leaders have the skills to make an impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yaya. And I'll just ask you to stay on the line with us while I welcome our panellists to the stage for our panel discussion. Elizabeth Molyneux, Associate Professor Jess Reeves, and Lauren Jacob. We're now, slight change to the program you have in front of you. We're going to move into the panel discussion now. And I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Molyneux, Deputy Secretary for Energy at the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, Associate Professor Jess Reeves, Senior Lecturer in Environmental Science at Federation University, and Lauren Jacob, a PhD student in Environmental Management at Federation University, and Yaya Ini, Managing Director, who we've just heard from at Accenture, is going to stay on the line with us as well. Let me just grab the microphones. Because apparently we have about 1.6 million people online, so we want to make sure that they can hear us.
No, it's 2.62 million.
Now it is 2.62 million, so I don't mean to frighten our panelists, but yes, that's very exciting. I'll start with you, if I may, Jess. You've been teaching environmental sustainability for more than a decade. How has teaching ESG and the response from learners evolved over that time?
We're on? Not on? Yes, on? Should be on. Well, it makes me feel a lot older, having been teaching it for 10 years. I think one of the most positive things that I've noticed is that our students' awareness of and experience of climate change has really shifted through that time from one of scepticism or denial to it being very real, very present, and they're in a hurry to do something. There's more of an existential threat, and what are we doing, and how can we act on this? So I think that's a real positive, seeing such a dramatic change in such a short time. One thing that's more of a concern, though, is that particularly for our young people, there's this real sense of intergenerational inequality. That our current and future generations will actually have fewer opportunities than our current and past generations. And this goes to housing affordability, but also the state of our environment as well. So I think there's a real opportunity here to shift our understanding of prosperity away from simply economic to thinking about prosperity in terms of a healthy environment and healthy communities as well. So a broader understanding, really taking that ESG approach. Another thing that I'd like to draw to your attention, and this goes to what Annabelle was saying, is that particularly for young people, getting an understanding of what their future jobs are going to be like. So I live and work in the Latrobe Valley in Gippsland, and we're seeing changes, as Duncan mentioned, in our forestry sector, our agricultural sector, in mining, in energy. And whilst we're putting a lot of effort into retraining and providing opportunities for our current workers, young people can't see what that future looks like for them. So we really need to move into creating tangible, visible opportunities so that they can see themselves in that future. And I think at Federation we're doing that particularly through our cooperative model by giving our students real-world experiences of what the world of work really does look like, and how they can bring this greater awareness and ESG mindset to the world of work.
Thank you so much, Jess. We're going to turn to the student perspective now. Lauren, you've obviously decided to translate your interest in environmental sustainability and responsibility into your PhD project. Can you tell us a little bit more about your research and what inspired you to pursue this?
Absolutely. So my project is a multidisciplinary project which is looking at biodiversity conservation at the local government level, but also considering the factors of local government that moderate that conservation. So looking at stakeholder views and opinions like community groups, barriers to conservation, so legislation, statutory frameworks, policy. And then at the end of all that, I'll actually be working with the local government to implement these findings, hopefully, in a statutory framework like the planning scheme. So I kind of got into this space after I completed my undergrad in environmental science down in Tasmania, and I began working in local government, and it hit me pretty quickly that in order to kind of achieve environmental outcomes, the social and governance aspect was really imperative, particularly in that local government interface. And I didn't really feel like my undergraduate science degree really prepared me for that. So I began working in that space, and I found a real, barrier to feeling like I could have actual environmental positive outcomes. So I approached my supervisor at Fed Uni and said I wanted to do a project that worked with people and had really pragmatic outcomes. That was really important to me. I guess I realised as well in working in that local government space that for me conservation wasn't just in a space over there that's isolated and protected. It is exactly where people live and work and exist. And I wanted that mindset to kind of be integrated into my research. In working in this project, I guess it was really important for me to develop skills in the social and governance space, which is totally new, not my background, but in working with local government in biodiversity protection, it was just completely imperative to making sure that the objectives that I wanted to achieve were attainable, had benefits to the local government that I'm working with, but also to the community where this conservation was actually occurring. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren. We're going to turn to industry now. When it comes to ESG monitoring and performance, what are the technical advancements you're most excited about, and where do you see the risks?
Thank you. So, look, I think the answer here is twofold. So there are technology advancements that are improving our ability to measure and monitor. So large language models, LLMs of course come to mind, because they enable fluid data exchange between organizations. So as I was saying before, a lot of the information that you need to monitor isn't necessarily yours. So how do you capture it from all these different sources? And LLMs are very good at, reading data from another company's sustainability report and converting it to a standard scale, for example, and then inputting it into your systems. Now, I know, for example, that many banks are doing this manually today with teams, so being able to use technology to do that really helps. And another example, and we've seen a lot of this, is the visual machine learning. Visual machine learning is improving, you're seeing it in cars and things like that. And the improvements there are allowing us to understand the physical environments and monitor and measure things that were previously quite hard or sometimes impossible for us to measure. But the other aspect of that is also that these technologies are becoming more democratized and more easily adoptable. So you don't need to have these very deeply skilled data science teams to use these things. You can use them now from the cloud providers. And I think that's both an opportunity and a risk. So it's easier to build these AI solutions, but while you don't necessarily need to have the deep technical skill to do everything, you still need to have a really good understanding of how the AI works, how it uses the data, what outcomes you can rely on, and to what degree you can rely on them. And you also have to have some good governance, both technical, but also organizational around those AI solutions. You've got to have some design and runtime checkpoints, and you've got to have independent verification techniques to make sure that you're not only getting the results from the AI solution and over time, but that you can also explain them, you can track them and make sure you're using them responsibly. So I think, it's that combination of it's easy to use, but you also have to know what you're using for, is what provides both the opportunity, but also the risk.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Elizabeth, can you tell us a bit more about the role of government in this space, including how the Victorian Government is integrating ESG principles into our state's energy transition strategy?
Thank you. Yes, so working for the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, it will come as no surprise that the E part of ESG is firmly in our sights. So the Victorian Government has set some very ambitious climate targets in terms of emissions reduction, percentage of renewable electricity into the grid. These are nation-leading targets. So the whole purpose of what I do on a day-to-day basis is to put in place policies and frameworks to allow the transition to a renewable energy future. So with that in mind, that's all about the E. We're trying to close down the coal stations in a managed and predictable way and bring in renewables as fast as we can. Which sort of brings me to the S, the social side, because we are seeing more and more this changing land use across Victoria because of the renewable energy entrance into the grid now. It used to be that we had big coal, well it is still, that we have big coal-fired power stations in a particular area in Victoria in the Latrobe Valley, and then some transmission lines, which many people think look pretty ugly. I don't mind them, but I wouldn't say that. I'm a bit of an energy nerd. And that brings the energy to the load centres, the Melbournes, the Geelongs, the Ballarats, as well as the regional communities. In changing the system to a distributed energy model, where more people are producing their own energy, where we have wind farms and solar farms right across the state, that requires extra transmission build. And we're hearing very clearly from our communities that that is very challenging. It's a change in land use in the middle of Victoria where we do have a couple of really significant transmission lines planned. People are up in arms about that change of land use and can they coexist as farmers, or where's the benefit for that community? So one of the policies it's a really significant change that government took on, the Victorian government took on, is to take that transmission planning function away from the centralised market operator and brought it into the Victorian government via a new statutory authority called VicGrid. And VicGrid essentially still do the transmission planning, which, to dumb it down, is a bunch of engineers drawing some lines on a map about the lowest cost way of getting electricity from one place to another, and brought 2 extra policy overlays onto that, both with that big S from the ESG side, which is one about strategic land use. So let's not just draw a line with the most efficient cost outcome from an electricity point of view. Let's start with that line, but then look at the overall land use associated with across Victoria, and do we need to tweak and turn that line to make it into a better outcome for communities? The other thing we identified was communities really had to see an actual tangible benefit to them for hosting this sort of infrastructure. And so these community benefit funds is also part of the framework that we've introduced by VicGrid, whereby the local communities surrounding the transmission assets and generation assets should get a reward. And so there's community benefits funds being set up both for local communities and also importantly for our First Peoples communities across Victoria. And that's definitely a significant change. And it's all wrapped up in that ESG. And then to quickly talk about the G, the governance. Coming from government, the governance is hugely important. It's really important to be transparent, to know who's making the decisions, who has the levers, and who gets to make the call on where you put the different resources in terms of time, money and people. So I think that ESG is, it's in our DNA in the way we are working within the DECA department, particularly for the energy transition.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. We're going to turn to the floor now for any other questions. And if you're monitoring online and you'd like to share any of the questions coming through online, please feel free to do that too. I'll grab the microphone and we'll make sure that we reach you. Does anyone have any questions from the floor for our panel?
Thank you. Thank you for our panelists. Yes. I don't have a question. I just want to ask is that now our panel discussion attracted 3 million audience online now.
Thank you, Jason. Very important announcement. That's excellent. Michael Poulton, Committee for Ballarat, has a question.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to the panel for your insights. To Elizabeth and Jess, I guess, over the course of this week, there's been some pretty extraordinary announcements from a geopolitical point of view, and the President of the US, top of the pops. I'm just wondering, Jess, to you, how you see that type of political leadership play out and what impact it might have. And Elizabeth, to you, from a government perspective, does it make you think about the direction forward from a state policy perspective?
Thanks for the nice tricky question. I think what's interesting, Trump says interesting things on a daily basis. What's perhaps more interesting is how other leaders respond. And we've seen China stand up and say that they're going to increase their renewable energy output. A lot of pushback from Europe as well, who are already very well advanced in the renewable space. So I think, and I hope that if nothing else, it alienates the US more and encourages other countries to step up. That's my hope.
In terms of the Victorian government, it's probably a control what you can control situation. So we still have our targets. The federal Australian government has come out with its climate targets and they're not terribly weak. So I think that Australia and certainly Victoria as one of the leaders in the Australian context, we just have to get on and do it ourselves. I wonder sometimes if what we're seeing is perhaps a response to the E in the ESG via the S. And politicians are guided by the S. That's how their power is given to them via the ballot box. But I think hopefully I would hope a lot of people can see past the fact that it's often a noisy few rather than the majority. But the S is going to become increasingly important over time as costs increase. We are rebuilding a system in Australia, we're rebuilding systems across the world from systems that are essentially sunk cost now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that does play out. I think renewables, there was a release of the net zero study, I think yesterday. And essentially, the cost is the cost regardless of the path you take, whether you take a net zero path or whether you don't. The cost is largely the same. And so I guess my personal view is, well, it's largely the same, why wouldn't you go net zero? But that's a decision that governments will make. But I think Australia has shown that it's committed to its emissions and climate targets, and Victoria certainly has backed that in with long-standing ones.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And we do have a few questions online, but I think we've probably only got time for one. So I might ask each of you just to give us a brief response on this question, which is, what are the opportunities for young people in ESG? Elizabeth, would you like to begin since you've got the microphone?
Thank you. I think there are many opportunities for young people in ESG, and as we see, I've worked in a corporate environment for 30 years and I've come recently to government. So the ESG reporting that used to be a bit of a sidebar for many corporates has now got many more teeth attached to it. It becomes so much more critical for the business, and I think governments will continue to push that because it's important that ESG becomes aligned as a business, if you like, all of itself, rather than just a reporting framework over the top of the fundamental business. So I think I can see that moving and getting more teeth over time. So therefore, the ESG component for future ESG workers, I think, is going to be big.
Thank you. Jess?
Well, I'd reflect on the previous question and say that it's a lot of old world, old mind thinking that has got us where we are, and young people have a freer mindset and a greater sense of responsibility to move things forward. So I'd say get out of the way and let them take the space.
I guess instead, extending upon that, as a young person, but now realising I'm not the youngest working generation anymore, which is incredibly daunting, I think my generation younger have a massive appetite for ESG and such a complex moral awareness of their impact and the things that they expect from businesses. I would say that the trickiest place is in coming into employment, feeling empowered with that knowledge and that expectation that the businesses are going to meet them there and be willing to take that information and that expectation on board. Exactly as these two said, I think young people are ready to go, and it can exist in any business in any way. So let's just do it.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah. Over to you.
I have to agree with everyone before me that the opportunities are there for young people. I look at the graduates coming into Accenture and the energy they bring, their ability to think about problems in new ways, not being bound, like someone said, to the old world ideas. So I think there's great opportunities, and the world's changing, and the people who are coming in, and then the next generation of ESG leaders and people in our teams, they've got all the energy, they've got the technologies behind them. So I in many ways envy them. It's a great opportunity to make an impact.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and please join me in thanking our panellists. Our final speaker this afternoon is Eric Solom, former UN Under-Secretary General. Eric is also a champion of the Global Renewables Alliance and patron of the ESG Future Foundation. He'll tell us more about the latest developments and the latest challenges in ESG around the world.
Hello everyone. I'm really privileged to be asked to address this most important event. And I know that a number of you are coming together in Australia, watching it online, and I believe there are also many Chinese participants. Warm welcome to all of you. Look, back in 2009, I attended a climate conference in Copenhagen. That was hyped as the one and big conference where basically we would solve all global problems. We went back enormously disillusioned. We believed nothing had happened. The ambitions were very high, the results were very low. But what no one in Copenhagen even hinted to was the fact that the price of solar energy would fall with 90% in the decade after, and that the price of wind energy will fall almost as fast. That is what's driving the global environment and green agenda today. Renewables are the cheapest forms of energy. If you switch from coal into solar, yes, in the past it was a huge cost. Now it's a cost saving. You save money. It's good for the economy as well as for the ecology if you make the switch from fossil fuels into renewables. That's why a new development path is possible for the first time in human history. In the past, if a nation wanted to grow, to become rich and prosperous, there was no other alternative than fossil fuels. Started in the United Kingdom, spread to France, to Germany, United States, to Australia, to Japan, to Korea, to China, finally to India, and to the rest of the world. It's the same model. We want to improve our economies, that we will do it with fossil fuels, because there's no alternative. Now the alternatives on the table, it's available, it's cheaper everywhere in the world. Going green, it's not a cost, it's an enormous opportunity. And that's what's driving climate and environment action these days. Let me give you some examples. In May this year, China added 100 gigawatt of solar energy to the grid. Most people may not be familiar with how much a gigawatt is, but ladies and gentlemen, this is enormous. It's huge. 100 gigawatt in China, that is more solar energy than any nation except China and the United States have added in the entire lifespan. It's more than Australia or Japan or Germany has ever produced, just 1 month in China. It's 4 times the energy grid, electricity grid in Bangladesh, which is the 8th largest nation in the world. China is now going green in every respect. It was a very polluted place 10 years ago. I would never go running in Beijing or indeed any big Chinese city. Now they're happily doing it because the sky is blue, the sun is shining, and you can inhale any amount of air. The speed in which China clean up the soil, clean up the water, clean up the air, and is now taking the lead on every green technology. 60% of solar, wind, hydropower, electric cars, electric batteries, high-speed rail networks, whatever you can mention, is happening in China alone, and it shows how important economy and ecology together is, because this has created huge markets for China, a lot of prosperity, is the main driver of economic growth in China. Move to India, it's largely the same. Prime Minister Modi is speaking about environment all the time. He's launching new green missions for India with one aim, bringing 1.5 billion Indians out of poverty, up into the middle class, and doing it by solar, by wind, by pumped storage as hydropower battery, or by electric cars, electric scooters, electric three-wheelers, and all this. There is an Indian company called Ola, that's the Uber of India. It has a very fun slogan. It says, Tesla for the West, Ola for the West. Believing that India can capture any number of green markets by high-tech, high-quality products. The state of Gujarat, which may be a lead state in India, have an ambition of 100 gigawatt of renewable by 2030. And it's on the way. Big industries of India, Adani and Bani, are constructing it. So it's not a future dream. It's happening right there and now. And India is going green, not as fast as China, but close to. Moving on to Indonesia, until very recently, the rainforest in Indonesia was in great jeopardy. It was a very heavy deforestation. I worked very closely on this because we formed the Indonesia-Norway partnership to combat deforestation. But last year, India came down to 0 deforestation because of good regulations from the government, and because all the big industries in Indonesia understand that you can reduce paper can produce palm oil, we can create the jobs and prosperity in Indonesia without getting any new trees. And then ending up in Australia, was a front runner in many green energies. Maybe the state of Southern Australia is a front runner also within Australia in solar energy and batteries, but many other parts of Australia is going to be the current speed. Some people are pessimistic because there is an important leader in a big nation called the United States of America who may not buy into my message here. But there is very little we can do. We can slow down the development in the United States a little bit. But for the global development, there's very little he can do because he cannot reinvent the solar panel or the electric cars. Everyone understands that the future of cars will be electric, and solar energy will be the dominant form of energy in the 21st century. That cannot be stopped by political means because it's now pushed by the market. If you ask what is the key for those nations who now lead the green pathway for a new green pathway for the world, I think three elements are key. Political leadership. The political leaders, the presidents and prime minister must lead from the front. They must set the agenda, they must frame the market, they must inspire the people to go green. That's exactly what we see in those leading nations which I mentioned. Second, political leaders cannot do the innovations. They cannot scale. That must be left to the market. With a strong leadership and a vibrant market with business, then the green direction is very clear. And lastly, people. People must be mobilized. I think we environmentalists sometimes have got this wrong. We attend sometimes to finger point to people, sometimes speaking to people who have very difficult language with a lot of acronyms and a lot of words which normal people cannot understand, sometimes also very, very boring. We need to speak to everyone. Environment should not be an issue just for the young and children in the cities. It's as much an issue for the old farmers, for the craftsmen and workers, for the retired people. It's an issue for everyone. And environmentalists must make it an exciting issue for everyone. What is really new in the environment context is that in the past it was all about avoiding problems, stopping deforestation, avoiding harm to people's health and environment. Now it's a lot more about the enormous opportunity by going green. We can create an enormous amount of jobs, much better life, much better cities with more pathway for electric cars and bikes, more metros, more greenery, much more livable cities where people really want to stay. So we can do everything for a better economy and a better ecology all the same. All choice, you want ecology or you want economy, it's a thing of the past. Now it's all about how we go forward, creating better lives, better economies, more jobs, or electric mobility, and renewable energy, green tourism, green agriculture, all these which is now available for us. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about the conference and the event and the outcomes, and I wish you a very successful discussion. Thank you so much.
What an incredibly hopeful, inspiring way from our very last keynote there. It's a great place for us to end the day. I do want to just say before I hand over to Peter Sy to close the event for us that the silent auction will remain open. So please do get over there and put your bids in before you leave this afternoon. And I will just ask Jason for an update on the live stream, if you don't mind, Jason.
I think it's up 3 million audience simultaneous online.
Okay, 3 million. There you go. That's great. Finally, to conclude today's event, I'd like to welcome Peter Sy and thank you for your partnership through the ESG Future Foundation. Please welcome Peter.
First, let me do some event acknowledgement. I would like to thank all our guests and people who have attended, both in person and online, to our event sponsor and to our co-host, the Federation University, and in particular, Professor Duncan Bentley. And thank you so much for your keynote speech, and also for Megan, and for your moderation and fantastic MC skills today. And also our focus, our technical team, and also, of course, the ESG Future Foundation. And in conclusion, my mentor and editor at the Sydney Morning Herald, Ross Gitton, told me when you start your story, please start with the most mind-boggling number. So we just heard. I'm going to follow Ross Gitton's advice here. So this morning, before the break, 1.8 million people watched online, and so just a little bit over 3 million people watched the afternoon session. These numbers are staggering, but staggering in their own rights, but even more impressive when we do some benchmarking. So I just quickly checked on my phone, benchmarking against some of the most popular Australian TV programs. Channel 7, 1.1 million people watch Australian Idol. 989,000 people watch Home and Away, Australia's most successful cultural export. So ESG Future Foundation conference, they attract 3 million viewers. So that's a very decent effort, I have to say. So apart from these impressive numbers, I think there are a number of very important lessons we have learned today. ESG is just more than the latest intellectual bubble thought. As Elizabeth mentioned, it used to be a sidebar with companies, a bit of things you indulge in your annual report just to show you're serious about some of the issues. But now it is very mainstream. Companies actually pay a lot of attention. It is the left, centre and right of their corporate strategy, especially with the energy companies. And we also have heard examples from leading Australian companies like Bunnings and Penfold about their ESG strategy. We heard from the managing director of Bunnings about their procurement strategy, in particular how they source their products that have been certified by certified forestry product. And also glad to see Penfold's and their reinvestment program in the community, and in particular their program workshops in Ningxia, which is actually, in fact, one of the poorest and the most impoverished provinces in China, but also a fantastic wine region. So in case you haven't tried, I've been told by my lovely former colleague, Jenny, that you have to try this wonderful CWT China wine trial from the Ningxia region, also Yunnan. So it's a lovely one, but also reasonably priced. But last but not least, I also want to acknowledge the fantastic role played by the Federation University in strengthening regional Victoria. I'm very lucky in some of my previous role, I have visited some of the regional universities in Australia, like Federation University, Charles Sturt, Newcastle. They played an incredible role in strengthening regional communities in terms of provision of jobs, training, employment, healthcare. So in terms also, as Professor Duncan Bentley mentioned, played an incredible role in social mobility in terms of providing a wonderful education opportunity for the first generation female students to attend the institution of higher education. So it is fantastic to see such wonderful institution play an important role in promoting social mobilities and employment outcomes in regional Australia. So there's so many wonderful stories and insight come from today's session. So I'm very privileged to be part of it, and I'm sure in the future the ESG Future Foundation will bring more eventful and impactful events like this. So thank you very much for your time.
And I think that's all, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.